The American black bear should have weighed 600 pounds, but when rescue workers found her in the cartel's golden cage, she was nearly 1,000 pounds. Her muscles bulged unnaturally. Her pupils remained permanently dilated. Every few hours, she would slam her massive body against the titanium feeding door, not to escape, but waiting for something that had turned this majestic creature into a monster. The compound raid had exposed countless horrors, but what this bear had been forced to do in captivity would uncover a level of criminal depravity that stunned even hardened DEA veterans. The raid began at dawn on a humid September morning. DEA agent Marcus Torres led his team through the sprawling Mexican compound, a fortress hidden deep in the Sierra Madre mountains. Intelligence had suggested this was more than just another cartel safe house. They expected drugs, weapons, and blood money, but no one was prepared for what awaited them beyond the compound's marble walls. The first gunshots broke the morning silence. Cartel guards, caught off guard by the swift breach, scrambled to defensive positions. The operation moved quickly, methodically clearing each section of the massive estate. Through the chaos of flash grenades and tactical orders, Agent Torres heard it, a sound that seemed out of place even in this madness, a roar that shook the very ground beneath their feet. As the gunfire subsided and the compound was secured, Torres followed the source of those otherworldly sounds. Behind the main house, past manicured gardens and empty swimming pools, stood a structure that seemed transported from a billionaire's private safari. Golden cages stretched in a long row, each housing creatures that had no business being in Mexico. White tigers paced in spaces far too small for their powerful bodies. A pair of elephants stood listlessly in a concrete pen. Exotic birds screamed from jeweled aviaries. But it was the last enclosure that stopped Torres cold. The cage itself spoke of fear, 3 times thicker than the others, reinforced with titanium bars and equipped with a complex feeding system that allowed no direct contact. The water system was automated. The floor, despite regular cleaning, bore deep scratch marks and disturbing stains. Empty bottles, hundreds of them, lay scattered near the feeding chute, carrying the sickly sweet scent of cough syrup. Inside this fortified prison, the massive bear moved with unnatural energy. Her size was disturbing enough, but it was her behavior that sent chills through even the most experienced agents. She showed no sign of the lethargy common to captive bears. Instead, her movements were erratic, aggressive. Her head swayed side to side, tracking invisible targets with those unnaturally dilated eyes. Every muscle in her enormous body seemed to vibrate with barely contained violence. The compound's few surviving guards were oddly more terrified of this cage than of federal custody. One broke down crying when asked about the bear, rocking back and forth while muttering prayers. Another simply shook his head and whispered, "El oso del diablo," the devil's bear, before falling into stubborn silence. The wildlife experts, when they finally arrived, were baffled. Dr. Sarah Chen, a leading expert in large predator rehabilitation, spent hours observing the bear's behavior. Her initial report noted signs of severe psychological trauma, but there was something else, something that didn't fit any known pattern of captive animal behavior. The bear's aggression wasn't defensive or territorial. It seemed almost performative, as if she was waiting for some signal, some command. As the day wore on, the bear's behavior grew more erratic. She would suddenly stand perfectly still, muscles trembling, before launching into explosive bursts of activity. She slammed her massive body against the feeding door with clockwork regularity, not trying to break free, but seemingly demanding something. Something the experts were beginning to suspect had nothing to do with food. The decision to sedate and transport her would have to wait. First, they needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. As Agent Torres watched Dr. Chen document the bear's condition, his team continued their search of the compound. In a hidden room behind the animal enclosures, they found records, videos, and equipment that would reveal the true horror of what this bear had endured and what she had been forced to become. The sun was setting over the Sierra Madre mountains, painting the golden cages in shadows. The bear's roars echoed through the growing darkness, carrying a story of cruelty that even the most hardened agents weren't prepared to hear. The documents found in the hidden room began to tell a story that stretched back 3 years. A crumpled purchase order, dated October 2021, listed the bear simply as Special Acquisition 1. The price paid, over $200,000, hinted at the cartel's twisted investment. She had been purchased as a young adult from a bankrupt private zoo in Texas, where she had already learned to trust humans. That trust would become her curse. The cartel compound's private zoo wasn't built for conservation or education. It was a display of power, a way for the cartel leader, Miguel El Cazador Ramirez, to show his wealth and control over nature itself. Each animal enclosure had been designed to create a spectacle. The elephant pen featured marble fountains that sprayed perfumed water. The tiger cages had climate-controlled sleeping quarters lined with imported leather. The bird aviaries sparkled with gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. But beneath this luxurious facade lay a calculated system of cruelty. Security footage revealed how El Cazador would parade potential business partners through his collection. Each animal had been trained, through methods that made even experienced wildlife officers flinch, to perform on command. The white tigers would roar on cue, the elephants would bow, and exotic birds would sing popular narco-corridos, cartel ballads celebrating their owner's bloody rise to power. The bear's cage stood apart, its harsh industrial design clashing with the ornate displays around it. The reinforced walls and automated systems hadn't been installed for the bear's safety, but for the protection of those who handled her. Living quarters for 4 dedicated handlers had been built within sight of her cage, allowing 24-hour observation. Their logs, meticulously kept in waterproof notebooks, documented a chilling transformation. The first entries described a relatively calm animal. Subject shows normal appetite, responds well to basic commands, maintains healthy sleep schedule. But 6 months into her captivity, the tone changed. Subject displaying increased aggression, sleep patterns severely disrupted, muscle mass expanding beyond normal parameters. The most disturbing notes detailed a strict schedule of supplementation and conditioning, though the exact nature of these procedures remained coded. Other animals in the collection showed signs of neglect or abuse, but nothing like the systematic alterations evident in the bear. The white tigers, though confined to small spaces, maintained normal behavioral patterns. The elephants, while depressed, showed no signs of chemical manipulation. Even the exotic birds, taught to mimic cartel songs, remained fundamentally unchanged as creatures. But something had fundamentally changed in the black bear. Dr. Chen's preliminary examination of the cage revealed evidence of a complex chemical regimen. Residue in the feeding system tested positive for a cocktail of substances: steroids, stimulants, and other compounds that had no business being in an animal system. The automated water supply had been modified to maintain a constant mix of drugs that kept the bear in a state of perpetual arousal. The other animals watched her with obvious fear. When she roared, the tigers would retreat to their sleeping quarters. The elephants would turn their backs to her cage, swaying nervously. Even the birds would fall silent when her massive form slammed against the titanium feeding door, as if the entire zoo understood that something unnatural stalked among them. Video fragments recovered from the compound's security system showed glimpses of late-night training sessions. The footage quality was poor, deliberately degraded, but certain scenes remained clear enough to disturb even veteran investigators. The bear's handlers, always working in teams of 4, would use a complex series of signals and rewards. The nature of what they were training her to do remained unclear, but the results were evident in her transformed physique and psychologically damaged state. A particularly telling document, found hidden in El Cazador's private office, revealed the twisted logic behind the bear's transformation. Written in his own hand were calculations of investment return and performance metrics. The bear wasn't just a display of wealth. She was a carefully crafted weapon, though the full extent of how she had been used remained buried in encrypted files and deliberately obscured records. As Agent Torres and Dr. Chen pieced together the bear's history, one detail kept surfacing in the handler's logs. References to event nights appeared with increasing frequency, always followed by notations about increased dosages and recovery periods. These events corresponded with spikes in the cartel's private betting records, suggesting that the bear's transformation served a specific, profitable purpose. The sun had set completely now, but the bear showed no signs of settling for the night. Her massive form continued its relentless pacing, muscles rippling with unnatural definition. The truth about what happened during those event nights was still hidden in the compound's records. But as investigators continued to process the scene, they knew they were uncovering something unprecedented in the dark history of cartel operations. The next phase of their investigation would reveal horrors that would challenge everything they thought they knew about human cruelty. The truth emerged in fragments, each piece more horrifying than the last. The breakthrough came when Agent Torres discovered a hidden door in the compound's basement. Behind it lay a circular arena, 30 feet in diameter, surrounded by elevated viewing galleries. The walls, heavily reinforced and scarred, told a story of violence that made hardened federal agents step back in shock. The arena floor bore deep claw marks. Bloodstains, both human and animal, had soaked into the concrete despite repeated cleaning. Heavy chains hung from reinforced anchor points, and scattered betting slips littered the private boxes. But it was the collection of videos, found in a locked cabinet in El Cazador's private viewing suite, that revealed the full horror of what the bear had been forced to become. The first video showed what they called conditioning sessions. Handlers would starve the bear for days, then inject her with a cocktail of steroids and stimulants. The massive animal's natural strength was chemically enhanced until her muscles bulged grotesquely. They trained her to associate certain sounds with the promise of food and drugs, creating a Pavlovian response that would trigger extreme aggression. But this was just the beginning. A guard, breaking down under interrogation, finally revealed the purpose of these preparations. El Cazador called them blood games, he whispered, hands shaking as he gave his testimony. Rich clients would come from all over the world. They would bet millions on how long their fighters would last. His voice cracked. No one ever lasted more than 3 minutes. The videos confirmed his account. Every few weeks, the cartel would host private events. Wealthy spectators would gather in the viewing galleries, drinking champagne and placing bets. The bear, by then desperate for her next dose, would be released into the arena. Then they would send in the fighters' men who had crossed the cartel, rival gang members, or sometimes desperate individuals fighting for money. Dr. Chen's analysis of the bear's behavior revealed the devastating psychological impact. They essentially created a drug addiction in a 1,000-pound apex predator, she explained in her preliminary report. The bear learned to associate violence with relief from withdrawal symptoms. Each fight reinforced this connection, creating a cycle of trauma and aggression that would be difficult to break. The physical evidence was equally disturbing. The bear's unnaturally enhanced muscles had put immense strain on her skeletal system. Her claws had been specially sharpened and reinforced with metal tips, a modification that would have required multiple painful procedures. Track marks from repeated injections covered her flanks, hidden beneath her thick fur. Another guard's testimony revealed the elaborately cruel system they had developed. Before each fight, they would withhold her drugs for days, he said, unable to meet the investigators' eyes. By the time they released her into the arena, she was in a frenzy. The sounds, the lights, the cheering crowds, she knew that winning meant relief. No one stood a chance. Financial records painted a picture of enormous profits. Each event would generate millions in betting revenue. The wealthy spectators paid premium prices for the privilege of watching what El Cazador marketed as the ultimate blood sport. Private messages between cartel members bragged about their undefeated champion, discussing her as if she were nothing more than a particularly successful investment. But the most heartbreaking evidence came from studying the bear's current behavior. Dr. Chen observed how she would still respond to the same signals used during the fights. Certain sounds would send her into a state of panic and aggression. She would pace her cage for hours, recreating the circular pattern of the arena. The titanium feeding door bore the brunt of her confusion as she associated it with the delivery of the drugs her body now craved. The psychological damage is severe, Dr. Chen noted. Bears are naturally solitary and generally avoid conflict unless threatened. This bear has been conditioned to seek out violence as a means of survival. Her natural instincts have been completely perverted. The expert's voice trembled slightly. In all my years of wildlife rehabilitation, I've never seen anything like this. The videos showed the progression of her transformation. Early footage showed a relatively normal, if cautious, black bear. But as months passed, the changes became evident. Her behavior grew more erratic, her movements more aggressive. The natural wariness of her species was replaced by a drug-fueled fearlessness that made her even more dangerous. The most disturbing footage came from what they called premium events. On these occasions, the cartel would pit the bear against multiple opponents simultaneously. The viewing galleries would be packed with spectators, their excited shouts mixing with the bear's roars and the screams of her opponents. The videos showed how she had learned to use the arena's layout to her advantage, herding her victims into corners before unleashing her enhanced strength. One of the younger guards, barely out of his teens, provided perhaps the most chilling detail. She knew when it was event night, he said, rocking slightly as he spoke. She would get more agitated, more focused. It was like she could sense what was coming. The handlers said she never slept on those nights, just paced and waited. They called her La Vengadora, the Avenger. But we all knew she wasn't avenging anything. She was just trying to survive. Evidence suggested that the operation had grown increasingly ambitious over time. Plans were found for a larger arena, with upgraded viewing galleries and improved betting systems. The cartel had even begun developing a mobile app for remote wagering, treating their twisted blood sport like a legitimate entertainment business. As investigators continued to process the scene, the bear's roars echoed through the compound with a new context. Each sound carried the weight of countless traumas, of natural instincts warped by human cruelty. The question now wasn't just how to safely transport her, but whether she could ever recover from what had been done to her. The rescue team would face challenges no one had ever encountered in wildlife rehabilitation. They would be attempting to save not just a captive animal, but one that had been systematically transformed into a living weapon. The rescue operation began well before dawn. A team of veterinarians, wildlife experts, and specialized transport crews gathered in the pre-morning darkness. Their voices hushed as Dr. Chen outlined the unprecedented challenges they faced. The bear hadn't slept in 36 hours, her powerful body still coursing with the remnants of the cartel's chemical cocktails. This isn't a normal large animal extraction, Dr. Chen explained, spreading out the detailed plans of the reinforced cage. We're dealing with a bear that's been conditioned to respond to any human interaction with extreme aggression. Her body weight and strength are far beyond natural parameters, and we have no way of knowing how she'll react to standard sedatives. The first challenge emerged immediately. The bear's enhanced metabolism meant they would need nearly triple the normal dosage of tranquilizers. Too little would leave her conscious and dangerous. Too much could prove fatal. Dr. Chen had spent the night calculating precise measurements based on the bear's estimated weight and blood chemistry. The transport vehicle, a specially reinforced trailer, stood ready. But getting the bear from her current cage to the trailer would require perfect timing and coordination. The team constructed a temporary corridor using reinforced panels, creating a direct path between the two enclosures. Every step had to be calculated, every possibility accounted for. As the sun began to rise, the bear's agitation increased. She seemed to sense the unusual activity around her cage, her massive form moving with increasing speed and aggression. The metal feeding door, already dented from countless impacts, shuddered under her renewed assault. Her roars carried a mix of rage and desperation that made even experienced handlers step back. The first attempt to administer the sedative failed completely. The bear, recognizing the dart gun from previous conditioning sessions, became explosively violent. She charged the bars with such force that the entire structure trembled. The sound of her impact echoed across the compound, followed by a roar that seemed to carry all the fury of her captivity. "We need to try a different approach, Doctor," Chen decided, watching the bear's pupils dilate further in the growing light. "She's associating any projectile with the start of a fight. We'll have to use the feeding system." This meant manually adding the sedative to the automated delivery mechanism, a dangerous task given the bear's fixation on the feeding door. 2 hours passed as they carefully prepared the new strategy. The bear's handler logs had revealed that she was conditioned to expect certain sounds before receiving substances through the feeding system. The team reluctantly decided to use these triggers, hoping to avoid causing additional trauma while ensuring she received the sedative. When they activated the familiar feeding signal, the change in the bear's behavior was immediate and disturbing. She moved to the feeding door with focused intensity, her massive muscles trembling with anticipation. The team watched in tense silence as she consumed the sedative-laced food, knowing that the next 30 minutes would be critical. The bear's resistance to the drugs proved stronger than anyone had anticipated. Even as the massive dose began to take effect, she fought to stay on her feet. Her movements became increasingly uncoordinated, but the unnatural strength remained. She slammed against the cage walls with decreasing force, but unwavering determination. "This is the most dangerous time," Dr. Chen warned as they prepared for the transfer. "She's disoriented and scared. All her training is telling her to fight through this, and she still has enough strength to be lethal." The team watched as the bear finally began to stagger, her roars becoming slurred but no less threatening. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the bear's legs buckled. She went down hard, her massive body hitting the concrete floor with a thud that seemed to shake the entire compound. But even then, they had to wait, watching her breathing carefully, making sure the sedation was complete and not just another temporary lull. The actual transfer required 12 people working in perfect coordination. The bear, even unconscious, presented a massive logistical challenge. Her artificially enhanced weight meant standard transport protocols had to be modified. Every movement had to be carefully controlled to prevent injury to both the animal and the rescue team. As they secured her in the transport trailer, Dr. Chen noticed something that made her heart sink. Fresh track marks on the bear's flanks suggested that the handlers had continued their chemical regimen right up until the raid. This meant that in addition to all other challenges, they would soon be dealing with severe withdrawal symptoms. The sun was high in the sky by the time they finished securing the trailer. Inside, monitors showed the bear's vital signs remaining stable, though her breathing was more rapid than normal. As the convoy prepared to depart, Agent Torres watched the massive vehicle, knowing that their hardest task still lay ahead. They weren't just transporting a rescued animal. They were attempting to move a living weapon, one that had been systematically programmed for violence. The long journey to rehabilitation was just beginning. The initial medical assessment at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Facility revealed the full extent of what had been done to the bear. Blood tests showed traces of at least 7 different performance-enhancing substances, along with evidence of long-term stimulant abuse. Her body weight was nearly double that of a healthy female black bear, and her muscle density exceeded anything the veterinary team had ever encountered. "The physical damage is extensive," Dr. Chen reported, reviewing the first comprehensive health evaluation. "Her heart is enlarged from the steroids. Her liver and kidneys show signs of strain. The repeated injections have left scar tissue throughout her body, but it's the neurological impact that concerns us most. Brain scans revealed patterns consistent with severe trauma and chemical dependency." The first weeks of rehabilitation focused simply on keeping her stable through withdrawal. The bear's symptoms were intense and dangerous. She would alternate between periods of explosive aggression and complete exhaustion. Her roars, once powered by drug-fueled rage, became whimpers of confusion and distress. The staff worked in shifts, monitoring her 24 hours a day, ready to intervene if her symptoms became life-threatening. Creating a new feeding routine proved especially challenging. The bear had been conditioned to associate food with both drugs and violence. She initially refused to eat unless she heard the specific sounds used before fights. The rehabilitation team had to gradually introduce new feeding cues, carefully avoiding anything that might trigger memories of the arena. Progress came in small moments. A month into her rehabilitation, the bear slept for 6 continuous hours, the first natural rest she'd had in years. The staff celebrated this tiny victory, seeing it as the first sign that her body was beginning to remember its natural rhythms. Yet even in sleep, she would twitch and growl, haunted by memories of her time in the arena. Dr. Chen developed a specialized rehabilitation program, drawing on everything known about bear psychology and trauma recovery. The bear's enclosure was designed to be the opposite of her arena prison. Instead of concrete and steel, she had soft earth under her feet. Instead of artificial lighting and crowds, she had natural sunlight and privacy. Most importantly, she had choice. For the first time in years, she could choose when to eat, when to sleep, when to hide. The physical transformation was slow but steady. As the drugs left her system, Her unnaturally bulging muscles began to shrink. Her fur, patchy from years of injections, started to grow back properly. The wild look in her eyes gradually softened, though she remained wary of any human presence. The rehabilitation team noted how she would watch them, not with the trained aggression of before, but with a bear's natural cautious curiosity. 6 months into her rehabilitation, they attempted the first environmental enrichment. Simple puzzles containing food were placed in her enclosure. Initially, she responded with frustration and aggression, smashing the devices as she had been trained to destroy anything in her path. But gradually, she began to show problem-solving behavior, working out how to access the food without violence. The most encouraging sign, Dr. Chen noted in her progress report, is that she's beginning to show natural foraging behavior. The bear had started digging in her enclosure, investigating plants, exhibiting the kind of environmental interaction that had been suppressed during her captivity. She was, slowly and uncertainly, remembering how to be a bear. The breakthrough came during her 8th month of rehabilitation. One of the staff members observed her playing with a large rubber ball that had blown into her enclosure. Instead of destroying it, as she would have done before, she batted it around curiously. It was a simple thing, but it represented something profound. She was engaging with her environment out of interest rather than aggression. Yet there were setbacks. Certain sounds would still trigger defensive responses. The sight of anything resembling the dart guns used in her conditioning would send her into a panic. The psychological scars ran deep, and some behaviors might never fully disappear. But the violent, drug-fueled killer was gradually being replaced by something closer to a natural black bear. As the 1-year mark of her rescue approached, the changes were remarkable. Her weight had decreased to a more natural level. Her movements, though still powerful, had lost their frenzied quality. She had developed routines that followed natural bear patterns, active in the morning and evening, resting during the hottest parts of the day. The bear was creating her own schedule, free from the artificial rhythms forced upon her by the cartel. The staff began to discuss the possibility of limited socialization with other rescued bears. It would be a careful, gradual process, but the fact that they could even consider it showed how far she had come. From a tortured fighter to a creature rediscovering her true nature, her journey represented hope in the face of unimaginable cruelty. The sanctuary's dawn chorus brought new sounds to the bear's world. Birds called from the trees surrounding her expanded enclosure, and the rustle of wind through leaves replaced the echoes of arena crowds. 18 months after her rescue, she had become a different creature from the tormented fighter they had found in that cartel compound. Her new enclosure, spanning 5 acres of natural woodland, allowed her to experience a world she had been denied. Small streams provided places to cool off and fish, while fallen logs and dense undergrowth offered opportunities for natural foraging. The sanctuary staff watched with quiet joy as she developed favorite spots, a hollow beneath an old oak tree becoming her preferred resting place. Yet reminders of her past remained. She still avoided anything resembling the arena's feeding door, taking her food only from scattered locations throughout her enclosure. Certain muscle groups, permanently altered by years of chemical enhancement, gave her movements a distinctive quality that told the story of her trauma. During thunderstorms, when the sounds reminded her of crowd noise, she would retreat to her den until the echoes faded. The sanctuary turned her story into a powerful lesson about wildlife trafficking. Her case became a landmark example in training programs for wildlife enforcement officers, teaching them to look beyond obvious signs of animal smuggling. The sophisticated medical records kept by the cartel, documenting their methodical transformation of a wild animal into a fighting machine, helped authorities understand and combat new forms of animal exploitation. Dr. Chen's detailed reports on the bear's rehabilitation process became a guide for handling extreme cases of animal abuse. What we learned from her recovery challenges everything we thought we knew about animal resilience, she wrote. These creatures can come back from the darkest places, but only if we have the patience to help them remember who they really are. The sanctuary began receiving requests from wildlife organizations worldwide, seeking advice on handling similar cases. Though nothing quite matched the extremity of the bear's situation, her rehabilitation provided valuable insights into helping animals recover from severe trauma. The protocols developed for her care became a foundation for treating other rescued wildlife. Perhaps the most profound change was in her interactions with her environment. The bear who once knew only violence and chemical rewards now spent hours investigating fallen logs for insects, swimming in her pool, and watching the sanctuary's wildlife from her resting spots. She showed particular interest in the younger bears in neighboring enclosures, though direct interaction remained too risky. As her third year at the sanctuary approached, the staff celebrated a remarkable milestone. During a routine enrichment session, they observed her playing, genuinely playing, with a pile of autumn leaves. The sight of this massive creature, who had endured such darkness, rolling in fallen leaves with almost childlike enjoyment, brought tears to even the most experienced staff members' eyes. The bear's story spread beyond wildlife circles, catching the attention of international media and lawmakers. Her case helped push through stronger regulations against private exotic animal ownership and harsher penalties for wildlife trafficking. Several countries updated their laws to specifically address the use of animals in illegal fighting operations. While she would never be a candidate for release into the wild, her life at the sanctuary offered its own kind of freedom. Freedom from drugs, from fear, from the constant pressure to fight. She would always carry the physical and psychological scars of her ordeal, but she had found peace in her new world. Dr. Chen's final assessment noted, "She reminds us that rehabilitation isn't about erasing the past, but about building a future where those wounds can heal." Every time she chooses gentle curiosity over learned aggression, every time she trusts her natural instincts over her conditioning, she proves that even the deepest damage can be overcome. The bear's journey from cartel weapon to sanctuary resident became more than just a rescue story. It became a testament to resilience, a reminder of both humanity's capacity for cruelty and its power to heal. In her peaceful existence among the trees and streams of her sanctuary home, she offered hope for other animals rescued from abuse, proving that even the darkest chapters could lead to new beginnings. As her story continues to unfold at the sanctuary, you too can be part of these incredible wildlife rescue journeys. Subscribe to our channel to witness more amazing stories of animal resilience and recovery. From heart-wrenching rescues to inspiring rehabilitations, every video sheds light on the critical work being done to protect and save wildlife from human exploitation. Join our growing community of wildlife advocates and help spread awareness about animal trafficking. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time. Hit that subscribe button now and be the first to witness more remarkable journeys of hope and healing. The sanctuary turned her story into a powerful lesson about wildlife trafficking. Her case became a landmark example in training programs for wildlife enforcement officers, teaching them to look beyond obvious signs of animal smuggling. The sophisticated medical records kept by the cartel, documenting their methodical transformation of a wild animal into a fighting machine, helped authorities understand and combat new forms of animal exploitation. Dr. Chen's detailed reports on the bear's rehabilitation process became a guide for handling extreme cases of animal abuse. What we learned from her recovery challenges everything we thought we knew about animal resilience, she wrote. These creatures can come back from the darkest places, but only if we have the patience to help them remember who they really are. The sanctuary began receiving requests from wildlife organizations worldwide, seeking advice on handling similar cases. Though nothing quite matched the extremity of the bear's situation, her rehabilitation provided valuable insights into helping animals recover from severe trauma. The protocols developed for her care became a foundation for treating other rescued wildlife. Perhaps the most profound change was in her interactions with her environment. The bear who once knew only violence and chemical rewards now spent hours investigating fallen logs for insects, swimming in her pool, and watching the sanctuary's wildlife from her resting spots. She showed particular interest in the younger bears in neighboring enclosures, though direct interaction remained too risky. As her third year at the sanctuary approached, the staff celebrated a remarkable milestone. During a routine enrichment session, they observed her playing, genuinely playing, with a pile of autumn leaves. The sight of this massive creature, who had endured such darkness, rolling in fallen leaves with almost childlike enjoyment, brought tears to even the most experienced staff members' eyes. The bear's story spread beyond wildlife circles, catching the attention of international media and lawmakers. Her case helped push through stronger regulations against private exotic animal ownership and harsher penalties for wildlife trafficking. Several countries updated their laws to specifically address the use of animals in illegal fighting operations. While she would never be a candidate for release into the wild, her life at the sanctuary offered its own kind of freedom. Freedom from drugs, from fear, from the constant pressure to fight. She would always carry the physical and psychological scars of her ordeal, but she had found peace in her new world. Dr. Chen's final assessment noted, "She reminds us that rehabilitation isn't about erasing the past, but about building a future where those wounds can heal." Every time she chooses gentle curiosity over learned aggression, every time she trusts her natural instincts over her conditioning, she proves that even the deepest damage can be overcome. The bear's journey from cartel weapon to sanctuary resident became more than just a rescue story. It became a testament to resilience, a reminder of both humanity's capacity for cruelty and its power to heal. In her peaceful existence among the trees and streams of her sanctuary home, she offered hope for other animals rescued from abuse, proving that even the darkest chapters could lead to new beginnings. As her story continues to unfold at the sanctuary, you too can be part of these incredible wildlife rescue journeys. Subscribe to our channel to witness more amazing stories of animal resilience and recovery. From heart-wrenching rescues to inspiring rehabilitations, every video sheds light on the critical work being done to protect and save wildlife from human exploitation. Join our growing community of wildlife advocates and help spread awareness about animal trafficking. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time. Hit that subscribe button now and be the first to witness more remarkable journeys of hope and healing.